Thank you all for being here tonight. For those tuning in, this is the second of DSA Afro-Socialist, Socialist Color Caucus's Black to the Ballot Candidate Forum. My name is Khalil Smalling. I'm an organizing committee member for the New York City chapter of AfroSoc. For those who are unfamiliar with us, we are a network of Black and POC members of the Democratic Socialist of America and other leftists of color. Capitalism exploits everyone, but Black people and POC disproportionately suffer under its injustices. We believe socialism is the key to addressing the inequalities of capitalism, and we support reparations. Current NYC-DSA campaigns that our members are involved in include the Defund NYPD campaign, Public Power New York, and Cancel Rent. We just heard from Kristen Richardson Jordan, Mario Russer, and Pierre Gooding. Now we will move to our next hour with Ruth Mcdaniels and Joshua Clennon. Our moderator for this evening is Tatiana Hill. Tatiana is a New York-based community organizer working to build political power with and for marginalized Black people, especially as it relates to ending mass incarceration and the systems that perpetuate it. Her advocacy work started as a labor organizer. She's one of the two original organizers that created the first union in any Verizon wireless store in the country. Tatiana is a constituent advocate for the progressive Senator Jabari Brisport. Hill previously worked with Vocal New York, a grassroots power building organization, where she organized and advocated for formerly incarcerated people in its civil rights union. So let's get started. Tatiana, take us away.
Thank you, Khalil. So I'm going to start out by introducing the rules, and we'll go into our questions. So candidates will have 2 minutes each to introduce themselves. I will ask the question and each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. If a candidate's name is invoked by the other, they will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. Questions will be asked in an alternating order. Candidates will have 1 minute each for closing statements. The last segment, I forgot the closing statements. It was an honest mistake. So this time you both will be able to do that as well. So before we get started, we'll hear opening statements from each candidate. I will start with Ruth. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm running for city council, as you know, and I thank you for this opportunity to be able to reach a younger demographic and to speak to situations that plague our community, that's been plaguing our community for more than 5 decades that I can recall. And I look forward to having this discussion.
Thank you, Ruth. Joshua?
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Joshua Clennan. I'm a housing activist, small business owner, former Bernie delegate, a member of BOM, DSA's branch, treasurer of Manhattan Community Board 10, and co-chair of economic development for the NAACP Mid-Manhattan branch. I'm running for New York City Council District 9 because my community is ready for bold new leadership and transformative change. I am the best candidate in this race because of my experience in local government, working in affordable housing, and my lived experiences as a native of Harlem. I didn't come from a political family or the silver spoon that other candidates have. My parents never attended college and they worked hard to survive the crack epidemic. I grew up in a working class family that was a mix of Caribbean immigrants and Southern Blacks that moved to Harlem during the Great Migration. A couple of years after I was born in 1995, my father was shot and killed while walking home as he held me in his arms by someone who simply didn't like the way that he had spoke to them. My mom, bless her soul, she never skipped a beat. She worked day and night as a beautician to keep the lights on and raise me as a single mother. Despite all her hard work, money was never enough, and oftentimes I'd come home to eviction notices on our door. And a couple of times we were actually evicted. So this is my message and platform of my campaign, and this is why it's resonating with people in my community, because it's real. It comes from a place of real experiences that are shared by the many residents of Harlem today. I've seen Harlem transform from vacant lots and abandoned buildings to being one of the now trendiest neighborhoods in Manhattan. Watching my neighbors be priced out of their homes and not be able to afford to retire in a community that they fought so long and so hard to save led me to get more involved in community activism. And I've been fighting for the past 6 years for socialist values in the public arena, fighting against the rezoning of Lenox Terrace, fighting for housing justice, for fair living wage, for public safety, reform, and reimagining, for real investments in public education, and to create more community land trusts in the village of Harlem. My vision for Harlem is to preserve our quality of life and bring bold progressive policies to the New York City Council.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Ruth. I'll start with the first question. So the question is, by how much would you support cutting the NYPD's budget? We would like you to give us a hard number. Some of the numbers that have been out are 1 billion, 3 billion. And we also would like to know, what have you organized around this issue? So I'll start with Joshua.
I support cutting the NYPD's budget by at least 1 billion. I say at least 1 billion because I think that's a fair starting point, but I'm definitely open to additional cuts. I think there has to be a comprehensive plan to demilitarize the NYPD and also phase out officers who have histories of police misconduct. Here in Harlem, we have precincts such as 32nd Precinct, which has the highest number of CCCRB complaints out of any precinct in Manhattan. So I think we really have to take a look at those things and really reimagine our public safety system to transform the culture of policing, transform the culture of public safety for our city, for our communities. So that is my approach. And I think it starts with doing the hard work of engaging with our community, attending meetings in our community, such as precinct council meetings, clergy council meetings, public safety committee meetings at the community board, where we really get to engage with community leaders and stakeholders in our community and build buy-in for these policies. So that's the work that I've been doing in the community. And I would encourage, other candidates to start showing up to these meetings as well.
Thank you, Joshua. And Ruth?
Give me, there's an ambulance behind me. I don't know if you can hear it. I was on mute. Okay.
Don't worry, if you need, let me know.
Okay. In response to cutting NYPD budget, there were several. The figure that I would look at is at least $2 billion. And that comes because I am aware of the fact that NYPD enhanced their numbers by taking on several departments. And that was school safety, which was under the Board of Education, and the Department of Transportation. Each of those entities came with their own budget. And the desire was because the current mayor wanted to have the biggest army in the city, and all of the cities, rather, in New York and other states. So now if we defund them of those two segments, one is revenue driven and one is a peace officer status, we can easily extract $2 billion from them and create entities for those current agencies to exist in other capacities that are more beneficial to what they were structured for, as opposed to being a part of a paramilitary organization. And it would also benefit the employees in momentum and morale, because working for NYPD is not an easy structure, nor does it complement the people of different demographics as far as advancement and hope. We have to change that. How do we change that? We separate that. NYPD is not the go-to spot. Before they were considered finest, they had finest, the boldest, the bravest. NYPD has devalued that title.
Thank you, Ruth. Next question will be, do you oppose the borough-based jail plan, and will you support the immediate closure of Rikers Island without new jail? What are your solutions for existing borough-based jails, and how will you support decarceration for Rikers now? So it's a series of questions. If you need me to repeat it, let me know, and I'll go with Ruth first. We'll alternate each question, okay?
The first response is yes, I support the closure of Rikers Island right now. And as far as borough-based prisons, I would like to say no, in the sense that I'd hope by now and going forward, we can work on things that could present other avenues of dealing with incarceration or punitive punishment. There has to be some other way that we address these problems. We can no longer sit back and say that it's all right. Can you tell me the last part, the last question?
Yeah, the last question was, how will you support decarceration for Rikers right now? Like, what is your immediate plans to decarcerate?
Well, being as that they're almost at a third full currently, I would definitely alleviate the parole probation piece. Instead of us having people rearrested for parole and probation violations, I would have them implemented in in-house supervision. That's one of the easiest ways to downsize that and address the crowding that they're having now. They've stopped really sending people to Rikers and implemented what they call release and waiting for trial and then being sent straight upstate after trial is over. So they really tried to cut back on those numbers, and I would agree with that as well.
Thank you, Ruth and Joshua, and let me know if you want to repeat the questions as well.
Yes, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so it's several questions. Is, do you oppose the borough-based jails plan, and will you support the immediate closure of Rikers Island without new jails? What are your solutions for existing borough-based jails, and how will you support decarceration for Rikers right now?
Okay, I do not support the borough-based plan for new jails. I do support the closure of Rikers, and I support the legislation for renewable Rikers to make Rikers Island a hub for renewable energy. First thing is, we don't have the money to create 5 new jails. We just don't. Fiscally, it would be irresponsible to devote money into creating, more places to incarcerate New Yorkers. It's fiscally, it's not efficient, and morally, it's wrong. I think we have to continue to expand upon what we've already been doing, the steps that we've already been taking to reduce our pre-child population. So what does that mean? That means creating more alternatives to pre-trial detention, whether that be, programs or community service or even just, tracking devices, ankle brace, things of that nature. We can do a lot more instead of just locking people up as they await trial. Cash bail has been, a great success, and there's been some challenges with that as well. But I think we have to continue to expand upon and build on the progress that we've already made as a city. In addition to that, I just want to say that we have to really take a hard look at the existing conditions of the jails that we have in the boroughs outside of Rikers. It's inhumane, the conditions that, people are living in these prisons themselves. So to just close Rikers and then just force more people into these existing jails, that also is not a solution. You cannot, crowd these jails that are already overcrowded and already have, inhabitable, inhumane conditions with more people. So we really have to take a hard look at that. Either we're going to expand these facilities and renovate and totally overhaul these facilities as well. But I just think we have to take a comprehensive look at it.
Thank you. So the next question is, should public schools have police officers? Sometimes they're called school safety officers. So Joshua, you can start us out.
I do not believe that schools should have public safety officers. I think it's a travesty that this was included in Department of Education's budget during the last fiscal cycle. I think just having police officers in schools kind of perpetuates that school to prison pipeline. I think we need to eliminate the presence of police officers in school. We need more guidance counselors, more mental health officials, more behavioral specialists who can adequately address the needs of children in our community. A lot of kids in our community just have trauma. They have trauma that they've experienced in their homes, in their daily lives. They've seen people get shot. They've seen people get killed. They've seen people get robbed, all different types of stuff. They've probably been jumped a couple of times on their way to school. Our kids are traumatized, and they're living with this trauma on a day-to-day basis and not really unpacking it or getting the care that they need. So I think we need to invest in those kind of solutions for our children rather than having police in the schools who are going to put them in handcuffs and incarcerate them.
Thank you, Joshua and Ruth.
Okay. First, in transparency, I used to be a school safety officer, and that's what we were, peace officers. I know that there's a big look at school safety right now, but I have to tell you that you have to have school safety in a school. And what does school safety looks like? Now, that's the conversation we have to have, because the fact of the matter is the union will not allow teachers to go into a school where there's no safety mechanism, nor do you want a child to come into a building that there's no safety in place. But what does that safety look like? I know when I worked in school safety, it was under the Board of Education in NYPD, and it was a vast difference. As a peace officer, our kids loved us. They never felt threatened by us. They came, they shared their situations. We were their parents away from home. We were the safety net. So now, if taking on a new title as being under NYPD changes the narrative, then we have to deal with that. But there's no way in the world that you can think that you'd have a building and there's nothing in place to stop people from coming in and harming children and harming teachers and just disappear. That's not going to happen. But what we can do is face the facts. We have to address what goes on in our communities, our urban communities. Because when I worked in these schools, we had gangs that would come through the doors, through the back doors, through the lunchroom doors, and those were real entities in real urban communities. So now a teacher's not going to put their life on the line and do that. So what are we suggesting? What I'm suggesting is that school safety come from under NYPD's title, because we know what that title represents in communities of color. And it goes back under what it was, a part of the Board of Education, and they don't want to hear that. I know I'm out of time, but I'm gonna stay within the guidelines. I'm gonna play the game.
It wasn't time just yet. If you want to finish your sentence, you can.
Okay. I think that we need to address that and make sure that we put things in place in our communities to definitely safeguard. And it doesn't have to be under NYPD, but there has to be some safety mechanism in schools.
Thank you, Ruth. So the next question is, do you support the expansion of charter schools? If so, why? If not, please explain why not. So Ruth, you can start us out, please.
I don't relate to charter schools. Never have, never will. If the public school system can't do it, why do we think that a charter school can do it in a public school building? Because they have budgets? Well, then we need to get that budget. Public schools need to get that budget. I started out in public schools. I did all right. I think that all children need to have an opportunity to get a good education in every facility that the city has to offer. People have been going to public schools for decades, and they're successful. But what's happened in District 3 and District 5, strategic. They know for a fact that if you have poor education, it perpetuates poverty, and poverty perpetuates incarceration. And that was what was set up around here. So now if we're not going to speak to the reality of what they've done, all we're doing is gaming. I don't even want to hear about a charter school. Charter what? Charter a bus. Let's get to business. Let's educate our kids.
Thank you, Ruth. And Joshua?
I'm also I'm in support of a cap on charter schools at the state level. I think the issue here, as you know, candidates for city council is the funding aspect, right? So the difference between charter schools and public schools is really accountability. When charter schools are getting public funding, there's no real transparency or accountability on how they're using those public funds. And that's an issue in our community. And it's especially an issue when you're giving charter schools now public assets in the form of space that, you know, belong to public schools. This is an issue that's become very rampant in our community, where we have charter school, we have, you know, 3 or more schools now in one building. I think the community in multiple ways. One, in terms of pitting parents and students against each other because they feel that they have to compete with these other people for resources in their own community, right? That's not right at all. I think if charter schools are going to be getting public funds, they need to be able to operate, you know, independently and get their own space and not encroach upon the schools.
Thank you, Joshua. So our next question is, do you support the SHSAT, the Specialized High School Admission Test? Do you support school screens, and do you support the gifted and talented programs? So Joshua?
Well, this is an issue that I'm still learning about. I grew up here in New York City, and special test. I declined to go because I wanted to go to a school, where kids look like me. So I went to Frederick Douglass Academy in my district. I'm a public school baby, so I'm not. This has been an issue that I've been following. I don't know if I have a position on it. I understand the need for standardized testing, but I do think it's unfair when all students across the city are not getting the same level of access to these test prep programs, right? So in more affluent neighborhoods, these parents, they have in preps courses and all type of things for specialized high school exams, while they're in middle school. Our kids don't have that. So if our kids are not being fairly prepped for these exams, how do you know, like, then the metric that you're using to basically say who's smart enough, who's capable of doing this work is flawed, because not everybody is being prepared the same way. So I think we really have to take a comprehensive look at that in terms of, if we're going to have specialized exams, then how can we ensure that all students are equitably prepared to take those exams, right? So that's a whole citywide approach. If we're not going to do that, then we need to scrap the exams totally, is my stance on it. Could you please repeat the second part of your question, please?
It was just asking, do you support school screens and gifted and talented programs? It goes in line with the standardized testing as well, the specialized testing.
Mm-hmm. I was never in a gifted and talented program, but people told me I was gifted and talented. But I'm not against the programs. I think it's great that, when you are able to identify kids who have a special interest, or showing that, a high level of work ethic, to, put them on a fast track place to really, capitalize on the opportunities available to them. I think that's needed in our communities. Also in terms of preparing students for college and things of that nature. So I'm not totally against it, but I am open to looking at how we can make these programs more inclusive for people in our communities.
Thank you, Joshua. And Ruth?
With regard to gifted and talented and testing, I agree that I feel that we should discontinue the testing and localize the access to gifted and talented programs. And I base it on the fact that I worked at Watley High School, and they had a gifted and talented program and an arts program, as well as deal with TMA, Thurgood Marshall Academy currently. And they have a program, and we have things in our own community that can offer the same gifts and affordabilities and access to arts and different robust talents that our community has that we can focus on. I don't think that we have to worry about whether we match what's going on downtown. I think we can create our own arts as a community that has historically been disenfranchised. District 3 and District 5, that's the districts under District 9 for the Board of Education. They're all disenfranchised communities, and the children who go here are from the community, and they come with art. We are art. Art is in us. So now, what does that look like? How do we portray it? How do we put that in a collective classroom and make sure that it's delivered? I don't think we need to test. I don't think our children need to go downtown to go to school and we compare it to Stuyvesant. I think we can get the same, if not a better education right here in our districts if we create the resources here. So no, I'm not testing. Testing what? Who's going to write the test? We're not comparing our children anymore. We know our children are talented. We know our children have art. We know our children have creativity. We can do this right here in District 9.
Thank you, Ruth. So the next question is, would you support a primary challenger to Andrew Cuomo from the left? Ruth, you will be first.
Absolutely. I'm tired of Cuomo. I say no more. That was the mic.
Thank you. Joshua?
I think that would be great. It depends on the candidate, though. I'm not just going to support any white face with a progressive platform. That's how you end up with the mayor that we have right now. And so I'm not falling for the okey doke. You gotta show me more than your credential, your progressive credentials and platform. You gotta really come to my community and to people in my community and hear what we have to say. If a candidate is willing to do that and run to the left of Cuomo, got my support. But if they're not willing to come down and sit with my people and hear what we have to say and take our issues and run on them, then nah, I'm good. You good luck on your own, buddy.
Can I add to that? I know you said white face, but I'm even down to the brown faces because we already know skin folk and kin folk. So brown, white, beige, blue, if they not talking to us as a community, they not talking.
Facts. I'll endorse that, Ruth.
The next question is, would you accept all expenses paid trips to Israel as an elected official? So Joshua, you can answer first.
Yeah, I don't really have no interest in going there. I want to go to Africa. I haven't been to Africa yet. They doing all expense paid trips there. That's where I want to go. I want to go to Africa. I ain't been to Africa yet. I don't have any interest in going to Israel. That's just me.
Thank you. And Ruth?
I'm taking on all paid trips. Yes. If I could get a trip to Israel, I would go. I would definitely go. I mean, Africa is a wonderful place and I will revisit that. But if it's all paid for and it doesn't compromise my integrity, I don't see the reason why not.
Thank you both for answering that question. Sorry, I lost my vision for a moment at the next question. I just wanted to mention to both of you that we are in support of Free Palestine. Palestine is a country of brown people that have been persecuted by the government. Their government mirrors a lot of practices that we see in American policing, particularly NYPD, with using surveillance methods and militarization of the police. So particularly that's why we did ask about Israel. So I just wanted to put that out there because it is a very important issue, especially in regards to NYPD and policing and, defunding the police and those kind of questions that we discussed tonight. So I'll go to the next question. Do you oppose the privatization of Nycha via RAD, the Rental Assistance Demonstration? So Ruth, you answer first, please.
That's funny that you asked that because I don't oppose the privatization of I think that if they can give people a better quality of life and maintain that money, that income, then they should do it. I think that it's a minimal expectation that everybody participate in the quality of life for every individual. I've reached out to, I've reached out to Jay-Z and Meek Mills. I mean, Jay-Z's crying about, which he bought property in Dumbo. You ain't got to go that deep. Why don't you get Marcy? Flip that narrative. Change the landscape on that. Employ your people, make them maintenance, make them construction. We have to create our own avenues. And everybody's got to pitch in. So if it's privatized by us, we have to buy into it. We have to, as a people, we have to buy into it. So no, I'm very open to the privatization of Nycha, and that comes with a stipulation of making sure that those residents can stay there and live in a quality environment. Sometimes private is what it takes.
Thank you, Ruth and Joshua.
Yeah, I do not support the privatization of Nycha. I think we have to preserve our public housing. Public housing is public asset meant for the public benefit, not privatize Nycha. But I do think we have to understand what RAD is and provide oversight for RAD buildings. So RAD is not, Nycha buildings, the ownership is not being transferred. They're retaining public ownership. However, they are being managed by a private entity that is transferring the actual management of the Nycha buildings to a private entity. which is different and in some cases needed. So right now, RAD is being utilized as a solution to pull in more federal funding to Nychas because they're not able to get this funding that they're now getting under RAD if they were not under RAD, right? So it's really a federal issue in terms of funding our Nycha because Nycha needs help. Like our Nychas, especially here in our district, like you walk through Lincoln, you walk through Polo, it's crazy. It's like a third world country. It's like the doors in the hallway don't even open. God forbid there's a fire and the elevator's not working. It's like it's a travesty. So we really have to be creative in terms of identifying more opportunities to fund and rehabilitate our public housing. But we do have to provide extremely strong oversight at the city council level to make sure that these RAD operators are doing right by residents of Nycha. And so in terms of buildings that have already signed on to this RAD program, what I'm proposing at the city council level is that we empower Nycha tenants to create an oversight board for their developments so that the RAD monitors can give financial reporting, can give maintenance and work order updates and statuses to that elected board of Nycha residents and tenants. I think that's critically important because without strong oversight, and this has happened historically in our city, without strong oversight, these people will take advantage of our public assets and public resources.
Thank you. The next question is, did you oppose Amazon coming to Queens? How do you feel about the Inwood rezoning and the Flushing rezoning? And if you answer yes or no to some of these, tell me please why or why not. I'll ask, I think Joshua to go first. I'm not sure who.
So I opposed the Amazon rezoning because the community didn't have any input in the process. They completely bypassed ULURP, they bypassed community board, there was no public hearings. They just came and announced the deal and just expected everybody to swallow it. It was, it's unbelievable. And I think, companies, corporations like Amazon, I think we have to be able to negotiate, and because they can bring resources to our communities in the form of jobs, which our communities desperately need. Unemployment levels have been high, specifically in our district. We do need jobs in our community. We do need more STEM programs, technology centers in our community to help our youth, to help our young people who want to be entrepreneurs, who want to have startups. We do resources, so we need to be at the negotiating table. So I was against Amazon because the community, we didn't have that opportunity in that arrangement. They were completely bypassed in Queens. And in regards to those other rezonings, again, those rezonings, they actually went through that whole process. And in Inwood, the community rejected that rezoning proposal. They were against it. The community was against it. The community board was against it. But due to support from elected officials, it still went through. I think that's emphatically wrong. And that's why we have to, reimagine this whole ULURP process and make it in a way where it's, the community input has far more weight. It should outweigh the voices of elected officials or DCP and those other entities who don't have to live through that rezoning and its actual immediate and dramatic effects. I think that's very important. In addition to that, we need to stop all these piecemeal rezonings of our communities that are always developer driven and create a comprehensive community driven approach to rezoning that really engages the community in long-term capital planning for our community. That way we can identify more opportunities to really make our community stronger.
Thank you, Joshua. And Ruth? You're muted, Ruth. Start over. You're still muted.
I agree with the fact that Amazon stepped out of bounds, and so did the mayor, with making that deal without notifying the people in those communities and making sure that they had outlined exactly what they anticipated doing and what they really wanted to bring to that community, and involving those residents in that community in a more beneficial way, because the numbers of jobs that they were kicking were far short of an insult when you talk about taking up that amount of space in a community like Astoria and not having as many people that are in Ravenswood and in all of the developments there as actual employees. It's a travesty. And the fact that people sat down and had that conversation without notifying them until the deal was done and like it was a gift is an insult to injury. As far as city council plays a part, but they're a part of the problem as well, because they participate in those deals as well. And we have to start making sure that the conversations from the community are actually being represented and transparent. City council can no longer sit back and make decisions about communities without involving the community. That's why the people are so disgusted now. That's why the voting is looking like it is, because people have been doing what they want for so long. As far as Amazon, I'm glad that deal flopped. And what was the other question?
The Inwood rezoning and Flushing.
Okay, and with the Inwood and the Flushing rezoning, those are deals that people make in private. Each one of them. We have to stop that. When you stop thinking about the people in that community and making decisions for them, that's when you get the results you want. We are not getting the results we want, and I'm glad we have to speak to rezoning like it's all strategic. It's all strategic. So yeah, I'm totally against them, and I'm glad that they both flopped.
Thank you, Ruth. So the next question is, do you support the full decriminalization of sex work, of fare evasion, and drug possession? And Ruth, you can start us out, please.
Well, we're talking about one of the oldest employments of the world, but everybody has to do what they have to do, and I have to say that no, I'm in support of it. I think that people should have the right to do what they need, and I think that there needs to be protection in doing that. And I think that when it comes, that's to the sex workers. I think that there has to be safety and there needs to be guidelines, but I don't think there should be punishment for it in the sense of over policing and mistreatment. I think when you deal with drugs and fare evasion, fare evasion, that could be dealt with, and I think it's overutilized, and I get it, because transportation has to have an income, but what does that look like? We have to have things in place, but it doesn't have to be punitive, and it doesn't have to cost people their freedom, nor does it have to cost them opportunity to get housing or a job. I mean, there are things to look at, and I think that we can scale back on how we deal with that fare evasion. I think that that's definitely meant to be. And when it comes to drugs, I find it very difficult to talk to, because I know Harlem for decades has been a dispensary of drugs, personal use and corporate use, and people, the Kennedys have come to Harlem to got drugs. But now, how does that look for us on the back end with marijuana and the distribution of it, and how do they set up dispensaries? I think that when you come with punitive damage, you have to feed back into that community and make sure that if you're changing that narrative, that you incorporate the community and you bring those people home and you set up ways for them to make sure that they get monetary satisfaction as well as liberties in making monetary growth. And it benefit the community that it's serving, because I do believe that marijuana specifically is medicinal. And I think it's needed in a community affected by trauma.
Thank you, Ruth. You actually answered our next question. So I'll let you circle back when we get to it, but it's good. You took 2 questions in one. So Joshua, do you support the full decriminalization of sex work, fare evasion, and drug possession?
I do support the decriminalization of sex work. I think it's necessary to really upend and really make some progress in terms of human trafficking. Millions of women, and not even just women, children and men as well, are human trafficked each year. And I think decriminalizing sex work is the first thing that we can do to really really start to make some progress in terms of stopping the human trafficking trade, and bringing down some of these networks across the world, because you have so many people who are tied up in them, who are just afraid to speak out because they're afraid of being incarcerated themselves or being prosecuted for their sex work. So I think it's an important step that we need to do to just stop this whole trafficking of people overall in the world. In terms of, what was the second point that you said?
Fair evasion, and the other one is drug possession, decriminalized.
Right. So fair evasion, yes, I think also needs to be decriminalized. First of all, we shouldn't be paying for it. MTA should be free. We need to get municipal control of the MTA, and we need to raise revenue to free for all New Yorkers. Black and brown New Yorkers should not be continuously bludgeoned with fare increases every year, while we're seeing substantial reductions in our service, poor service, unclean, unsanitary stations, and and things are just not getting better. They've gotten worse over the years. I've been around the subway all my life, and it hasn't gotten any better. So yeah, in support of that. And lastly, in terms of drugs, so I'm against the full legalization of marijuana. In terms of other drugs, you'd have to be more specific in terms of what drugs you're referring to, because I think drug trafficking is, obviously a big issue here in our community. You walk through Harlem, I walked past 2 people shooting up today on a street across the street from schools. So I think it's more, we need to target the traffickers, the people who are bringing drugs into our community, rather than, and then provide abuse solutions and rehab for the people who are utilizing the drugs. But we definitely need to prosecute people who are trafficking in our communities.
Thank you, Joshua and Ruth, for answering those questions. I just briefly wanted to touch on the drug possession piece, just to speak from a point of view of our community in DSA. Drug possession is the #1 crime in America that people are incarcerated for, and that involves directly with the war on drugs, which we know is directed at the Black and brown communities. So just keep in mind when we think about drug possession, it's just someone having drugs on them or the tools to use drugs as well. And that tends to be our people in our neighborhoods who are policed the most. So we all understand the necessity of public safety and how drugs have impacted our communities negatively. But keep in mind how they police other communities, with the opioid crisis and how that's being viewed compared to the war on drugs in our neighborhoods. So I just wanted to point that out. And the next question, Ruth, you kind of touched on it. You did, but feel free to answer it again if you like. The question is, do you support cannabis? What actions do you take to ensure cannabis justice? And what is your understanding and desire for how marijuana justice will work for our communities? Did you guys hear me okay? My background was noisy a little bit. So
yes, I did.
Answer first.
Yeah, you want to start me? Yeah. I do support legalization of cannabis. I don't partake in it myself, but I do support people using it. I have in my college days, and I understand why people do it and the benefits of doing it. I've been supporting marijuana legalization for years. In terms of just my advocacy in various local races, and even with Bernie's campaign as a delegate with DNC. I'm following the legislation that's developing in the state legislature right now and actively talking to my elected officials about it. I think there needs to be a priority in terms of this aspect for people who have been marginalized and harmed and affected by the criminalization of marijuana the most. So I think Black and brown communities, in terms of legalization, we need to be first to the market. We need to have those licenses going to people in our communities so that we can tangibly benefit from the legalization of marijuana. That's not what we've seen across the country in places like Colorado, Washington, D.C., and all these other cities where they've legalized it. You see the opposite, where most of the people who are owning now these markets and companies and these cannabis companies who are having IPOs, they're all white owned. I think that's a travesty. So I think we need to take proactive measures to make sure that Black and brown communities benefit the most, if not 100% from the legalization of marijuana.
Thank you, Joshua. And Ruth?
I support cannabis in my community, 110%. Not only do I support it, but I think that they need to give everybody who they locked up a $30,000 grant, money to go towards them starting their own cannabis program. There's no way in the world that you stop countries. They stop Jamaica, they stop Mexico, they stop Hawaii, and a plethora of other places that were shipping weed into Harlem, just so that they could capitalize off of the distribution of marijuana and incarcerated thousands of people for years and think that they should have that for themselves. They have to give that money back. It should be a grant for everybody released, and everybody needs to be released and have an opportunity to get that grant, whether they use it for that or just to get their head right and make sure that they can stabilize themselves for being incarcerated for all of that time on something that they knew that they were going to market. Oh yes, we have to have a reinvention of marijuana in our community. How we have to change that. And I definitely agree with it.
Thank you both for that. So this is our last question, and it's a two-part question. Are you a member of DSA? Do you identify as a democratic socialist, and why or why not? So Ruth, you go first.
No, I'm not a DSA. And I just identify as Ruth Mcdaniels, mother of 5, grandmother of 7. I won't say I'm 100% with y'all, because if y'all say something I don't like, I'm off the boat. We here, we having conversation. If the conversation is beneficial to my community, I'm cool with y'all. But if you go left, I go left. If you go right, I still might go left. Okay? So we're not using each other. We just all in this together. Much love.
Thank you, Ruth. And Joshua?
Yes, I am a member, a dues paying member at DSA. I'm a member of the Bum branch. I used to be, before I decided to run for office, I was active on the electoral working group for the branch. I was a delegate for Bernie Sanders in 2016. So I was kind of I got on this wave pretty, in the inception, before progressivism became very popular and before socialism really became popular. I do identify as a democratic socialist, but I think, we have a lot of work to do with getting everybody, on the same page and really defining our values and what we believe. I think sometimes we can miss the mark on that. We can all be not on the same page, because we got people in DSA who are self-described communists, self-described anarchists. So I think there's a lot of work to do in getting that together, because I'm not on that at all. Like Ruth said, when y'all go talk about communism and anarchists, lost me, I'm off the boat. I think DSA has to get that together. That's an internal challenge for the organization, and I hope they can get that sorted out. But yeah.
Thank you. And thank you both for that. So now I'll give both of you the opportunity to make closing statements. Feel free to touch on the work you've been doing in the community around some of the issues that we mentioned tonight, as far as mass incarceration, education, and criminalization of our communities, as well as the resources that we need. Just let us know who you are and who we want to support in this race. Thank you. Joshua, you can go first.
Okay, so thank you guys. So like I said, so my vision for Harlem is really to preserve our quality of life, maintain affordability long term, and build permanent solutions for our housing crisis that we're experiencing right now. I've been doing this work in my community for the past 6 years. Even though I'm technically the youngest candidate in this race, I honestly would say I'm the most candidate in this race just because of the experiences that I had working directly in affordable housing. I managed low income housing cooperatives, and I've been able to prevent many HCFCs from foreclosure and help working class residents in our community maintain their equity long term. In addition to that, I've been working on a community board. I'm the treasurer of the board and chair of the district needs task force. So what I do is basically help comprise the district needs statement for our community board, which is all of Central Harlem, and we submit that to the city council and to the mayor's office to identify for them what are the most pressing issues in our community and where do we need funding. So that's a big aspect of what the community board does, and I've been trusted by all of my colleagues on the community board to do this work. So I'm prepared to do the job in the city council, actually do the work, do the actual job. And I've lived the life of I've lived all of the experiences, the challenges that people are facing today. So that's why I think I'm the best candidate.
Thank you, Joshua, for that. And Ruth, final statements.
Okay, well, I'm a retired civil servant, and I've been giving my life to this city for the children, for the people in the welfare centers, in the shelters, in the schools, and I've retired. I feel that right now, we need somebody, and I'm that body, that has to create legislation, that has to get the resources we need in a community that has been inundated with mass incarceration. We know where the money is. Stay focused. Hearing where the money resides. And we know that that money has been channeled to other areas, courtesy of community boards. We know this, but we have to have people in place who are going to do what they say, that considers the community that they represent, get the resources that they need. District 9 can be the best. My intentions are to make it the best, generate every resource that we need, and create every legislation that we need, get what we need. We can't look to anybody else. We have to change the whole picture. We have to change everybody in position. We can no longer sit back and allow who's been in place to stay in place. Change has come. And I've been doing it. I'm a tenant association president. I clean the streets myself when sanitation doesn't come. I give out food, been giving out food long before COVID, because our community needs food. Part of the precinct council because we have to be at the gate with NYPD. We can't wait for George Floyd to have a conversation. That conversation has to be ongoing. Why do I participate as a precinct council vice president? Because I work for them. And I know that what you don't inspect, you can't expect. And that's why I make sure they will know my name. It's not going to be, who is that calling? No, you're going to know what Ruth Mcdaniels calling. And this is what I expect for you to do in this community. I think that as a community that is changing, we have to write our own narratives on what that change has looked like. I think it begins with me. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this.
Thank you. So I want to thank our candidates, Joshua Clennon and Ruth Mcdaniels. I want to thank the folks who've attended tonight. I touched on a few issues throughout the call today, but I just want to say these forums are bringing up issues that we're facing in all of our communities, in Black and Brown communities nationwide, even worldwide. So we do have, as a people, to come together and keep fighting for our communities to get the resources that they need. A lot of these conversations tonight have centered around reimagining what our community could look like, us knowing the possibilities, the strengths that we're capable of, but also acknowledging this powerful, detrimental system of systemic racism and oppression that is centered around capitalism, which oppresses our people. Our people are the bane existence of what capitalism does to folks. We've been suffering when we see violence, when we see lack of education, lack of healthcare, mass incarceration. These things are literally killing our people and tearing our communities apart. So our solutions and our support for our community needs to be centered around them, people first, because capitalism does not put people first. So I really thank you folks for attending tonight. I thank everyone for promoting these powerful and necessary ideas to put our communities forward. It's a necessary evil that we have to fight in this country because of how it was built on the backs of our ancestors and indigenous people, but we will continue to fight this. And I just love hearing these community ideas from everyone, knowing that whoever wins this race will still have the rest of you around in our communities advocating for our people and continuing to do the work, because that's what all of us are here to do. So I thank everyone for attending tonight, and everyone go in peace and in safety, and ashe.